100% grass-fed sheep. What happens when you quit feeding grain and just start feeding grass? This year I quit feeding grain to my sheep, and if anything, they look fatter on just nothing but hay. When they're eating hay, it looks like they're actually healthier and happier and put on more weight than they were on grain. And I had to quit feeding them grain because once I switched over to organic grain for my organic certification, this stuff is like $25 a bag. I mean, it's so expensive, there's no way I could feed them organic grain. So I had to look at my hay crop as being the number one thing I was going to feed to them. And so I've used about 6.5 bags of this organic grain because it's so expensive over the course of a year just to get the sheep to go into the barn. And that's the only purpose it has now. But before I switched to organic grain, I was feeding them grain from the co-op. It seemed like they were always fighting over the grain. They were just starved for it. They couldn't get enough. It was like they were just desperate to get the grain, just starved for it. Then in the spring, when I'd switch them back over to just a grass diet, it looked like they didn't gain any weight for a couple of weeks, like there was kind of a bounce where they were having to transition back over to grass again, and they just weren't improving. Also, when I fed them grain from the co-op, it was like a mixture of corn, oats, and molasses. I never fed them that much. I fed them just enough to kind of mess up their rumen and kind of ruin it for their grass intake. I believe that's what I was doing. So I started doing some research on what I was doing wrong and why they're doing so well now. So here they are now on just a grass-only diet, and they're all fat. They all look great. They put on weight, and they have no real problems. So what's going on? So I asked ChatGPT to look at peer-reviewed studies, that is, all the scientific literature on what happens when you switch sheep back and forth between grain-based and grass-based diets. And what it told me is that when you switch from grass to grain, the pH changes inside the rumen. The microbiomes, or all the different microbes, also change. And the bacteria that break down fiber, they start to decline too. So you're starting to increase your starch bacteria, but your fiber bacteria decline. And so when you feed grain to a sheep, you're making a dramatic change to the way it processes its food. It becomes much less efficient at digesting fiber and more reliant on starch fermentation once you start feeding grain. When you switch back from grain to grass, the microbes start growing again that will break down the fiber, and the rumen pH changes as well. But that last point is there's a period of adaptation that's needed for the rumen function to normalize, often about 1 to 2 weeks. And that explains why I saw a bump when I quit feeding them grain and put them back on the grass diet entirely. They just didn't seem to do very well for a couple of weeks. This is also telling me that you can't do grain and grass both at the same time and be excellent at both. It's not like supplementing a little bit of grain to go with your grass. It really kind of destroys their grass efficiency. And so the grain is not helpful. You need to be on one or the other, it looks like to me. ChatGPT also talked about the acidosis risk when you switch over to a lot of grain all at once. It can cause some problems. And it's the way they break down the grass or the grain. The grain will give you high energy and you'll get a lot of weight gain. But on grass, that last point down at the bottom of the page, on grass, the total digestibility of fiber is higher, and the fermentation supports the energy needs differently. It's really just a different animal that grows on grass as compared to one that's raised on grain. They process their energy differently and they act differently, and they just respond differently. A sheep's stomach is composed of 4 parts. The food comes in through the esophagus in the upper right-hand corner of this picture and goes into something called the reticulum. Here's a cross-section of this first part of the stomach called the reticulum. And it looks kind of like a honeycomb. The food flows freely between the reticulum and the next compartment called the rumen. And the main function of the reticulum is to collect the smaller particles and move them on down into the rest of the stomach, while the larger particles remain in the rumen for more digestion. Also, if the sheep has like a hardware problem where it eats a nail or some piece of metal, it'll get stuck here. The food from the reticulum can be passed to the rumen and even be brought back up to be chewed again and then back down to the rumen. The rumen is lined with little fingers that act for nutrient absorption, and it acts as a fermentation vat for microbial fermentation. About 50 to 65% of starch and soluble sugar is consumed, is digested in the rumen. And the microorganisms in the rumen, which is bacteria, they digest the cellulose from plant cell walls, complex starch. They synthesize protein from non-protein nitrogen and also synthesize the B vitamins and vitamin K. The rumen environment operates without oxygen. It's anaerobic, and it produces gases like carbon dioxide, methane, and hydrogen sulfide. So these gases rise to the top of the rumen above the liquid that's in there. The omasum is spherical and connected to the reticulum by a short tunnel. This is where the sheep absorbs water. The omasum is called the many piles or the butcher's Bible in reference to the many folds or leaves that resemble the pages of a book. These folds increase the surface area, which increases the area that absorbs nutrients from the feed and water. So this is where you get your water and the nutrients directly from the feed. The abomasum is the true stomach of a ruminant. It's the compartment that's most similar to the stomach of a human. The abomasum produces hydrochloric acid and digestive enzymes such as pepsin to break down proteins. It receives digestive enzymes secreted from the pancreas to help break down the fats. These secretions help prepare proteins for absorption in the intestines. The pH in the abomasum generally ranges from 3.5 to 4, which is pretty acidic. The abomasum is also where you're going to find the barber pole worm and other parasitic worms inside a sheep. Now, the design of the ruminant digestive tract is absolutely brilliant, and it's shared by a lot of different animals. And cows, sheep, and goats are what we think about with ruminants, but it's also shared by like bison, elk, and even giraffe. There's a lot of different ruminants in this world, and they all have the same quality of being able to eat rough grass and fibrous woody plants and turn that back into what they need to survive. And that's not what just every animal can do. The design of the ruminant digestive tract is absolutely brilliant, and how it works along with bacteria to break down and make these wood products or these grass products into food for this animal. Now, Charles Darwin has not made a monkey out of me, and I believe there's intelligent design to this rumen system. And in Leviticus 11, ruminants are the only land animals that God has told us to eat. The other land animals, like the pig, contains trichina worms. The rabbit has tularemia or rabbit fever. And even the horse, it has tetanus. So these other animals contain diseases. But the ruminant is supposed to be the one that we're meant to eat. And whatever your views are, I have found a lot of benefit, a lot of health benefits from following Leviticus 11. It's made me much healthier than all the people around me. And so whether you believe like I do or not, the ruminant digestive tract is still a masterpiece of engineering. And it's really meant for grass, not grain. When you add grain to it, you end up with this problem with Clostridium perfringens. Clostridium is found in nature. It's everywhere. It's also found in the intestinal tracts of humans and other vertebrates like sheep and cattle. Enterotoxemia is caused by the toxins released by Clostridium in the intestines. Lamb dysentery is also caused by Clostridium in lambs that are less than 3 weeks old, and this is because they're feeding them grain. The enterotoxemia caused by the Clostridium that occurs in sheep and goats is caused because there's a rapid increase in the dietary carbohydrates, and this is when you feed the animal grain. This is called overeating disease or pulpy kidney in sheep, and it's entirely man-made, and it has to do because you're putting grain into a rumen or into a ruminant digestive system that's meant for grass. So the way modern agriculture fixes this problem is they inject the animal or the sheep or the cow with the vaccine to fix the problem they created with the grain. And yet when you look at the vaccine, it doesn't even tell you what's in it. The only thing it tells you is that there's some sort of carbolic acid that they use to preserve it with called phenol. And that's on the back side of this thing. So what's in there? Well, now you're putting something else into your food. You know, it makes just so much more sense to feed your animals grass. You know where the grass came from. You know, when I get this grain down at the co-op, I don't know where it came from. I don't know what it was sprayed with. I feed them grass, and they come out good. I don't have to inject them with a vaccine. They're just healthy, and that's the way God meant for them to be raised. They're meant for grass. They're not meant for grain. We're doing something terrible to them when we put them onto all this grain. Well, thanks for watching the video.